Yes, so thank you all for joining us. I think this is a really timely panel, especially what's been happening around the crypto market. The purpose of these panels is really to bring forward innovative ideas around working with improving the lives of women and girls. We also do thematic panels, and the idea is that this isn't a one-stop event. We are hoping that there will be connections made, opportunities for collaboration, actually giving a platform to some of the most innovative programs that are happening, which will then encourage others to join in and to connect. So really, this is the beginning of the story. I was speaking yesterday with Mary Lynn Iskandarian from Women Well Banking, and I told her we were doing this panel. I had sent the link, and she said to me, I think it's so great you're doing it, because the risk is people connect cryptocurrency with blockchain, not recognizing that blockchain is a vehicle that will help to really break some significant barriers which are creating the poverty around women and girls in the most rural areas. One of those is the supply chain, really making the supply chain much more transparent, so you can ensure that there is a greater equity in the profit sharing of to rural women. Another way is, and we're going to touch on all of these, another way is, of course, using blockchain for access for these women to financial services, clarity in the way that they can actually keep track of both their funds and their supplies. And another way, I think, which is really quite revolutionary, and I think that Seema is going to talk about it, is also using blockchain for fundraising. And again, this really pairs up with giving women's belief in the democratization of philanthropy, where we give everybody the opportunity to be a philanthropist. Without any without any concern about how much money you have in the bank, but there are so many different ways that we can help. So we have a wonderful panel, and I have to say I use technology to find some of the people. So I made a little message on LinkedIn, and I got a wonderful reply from Paget and Shadrack, who are amazing panelists. So technology works and social media works. So I would like to thank Seema Nair, who's an active member of Giving Women, who came up with this idea and has really led the whole creation of this panel. So I will pass on to Seema, and she will then do the hard work. Thank you so much, Seema. And thank you, Naomi, for the idea as well.
Thank you, Atalanti and Noemi, for the opportunity to have this discussion, for that very nice introduction. And welcome to everyone who's joined us from wherever you are today to hear about how blockchain technology is powering social impact initiatives around the world. The Tech for Good movement aspires to use technology for the good of humanity and for the planet. And as we enter the age of Web 3.0, blockchain is being hailed as the next revolutionary technology. It's poised to disrupt global supply chains and the financial system, among others. Now, as Atalanti mentioned, a big reason blockchain has gained so much prominence in recent years is because of its most notable application, cryptocurrencies. But the potential uses of blockchain go far beyond that. Blockchain is the underlying technology that powers crypto, but it also extends to things like voting systems, education, agriculture, and healthcare, to name a few, where it's being used to improve efficiency, security, and trust between transacting parties. And really, at the end of the day, the true value of any technology lies in its ability to solve real-world problems, right? And change the ways we interact with each other. And that's what we'll be delving into today. I am very honored to be joined by a truly global panel of experts today, representing nonprofits and organizations that are harnessing the use of blockchain tech to provide solutions for underrepresented communities and people. So I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Luise Ammerschuber, Director and Founder of Yes Impact, who's joining us today from Switzerland. Caroline Johnova, Co-Founder and CEO of WAGMI, who is in Spain. Paget Hargreaves, CEO of AgriUT Foundation, who is joining us very late in his evening today from Australia. So thank you. And Shadrack Kubyane, co-founder of Coronet blockchain, who is joining us from South Africa. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here today and for the preparation leading up to the event. I'll come back to you in a few minutes. In the meantime, for those who've come to listen to the discussion, if you feel like you don't completely understand blockchain yet, that's okay. You're not alone. It's a very new concept that's just now entering the mainstream, and that's why discussions like this are so important to raise awareness. We won't go too much into the technicalities of the technology itself, thankfully. We will try to demystify some of the more common terms as they come up in the discussion and provide some resources where you can get more information after this if you're interested. But to help set some context for the rest of our time together, we have prepared a short video that explains blockchain in about 2 minutes. So Kathleen, if you could please do me the honor of playing it. Thank you.
When you vote, have you ever wondered whether your ballot is actually counted? If you meet someone online, how do you know they're who they say they are? When you buy coffee that's labeled fair trade, what makes you so certain of its origin? To be sure, really sure, about any of those questions, you'd need a system where records could be stored, facts could be verified by anyone, and security is guaranteed. That way, no one could cheat the system by editing records, because everyone using the system would be watching. Systems like this are on the horizon, and the software that powers them is called a blockchain. Blockchains store information across a network of personal computers, making them not just decentralized, but distributed. This means no central company or person owns the system, yet everyone can use it and help run it. This is important because it means it's difficult for any one person to take down the network or corrupt it. The people who run the system use their computer to hold bundles of records submitted by others, known as blocks, in a chronological chain. The blockchain uses a form of math called cryptography to ensure that records can't be counterfeited or changed by anyone else. You've probably heard of the blockchain's first killer app, a form of digital cash called Bitcoin that you can send to anyone, even a complete stranger. Bitcoin is different from credit cards, PayPal, or other ways to send money because there isn't a bank or financial middleman involved. Instead, people from all over the world help move the digital money by validating others' Bitcoin transactions with their personal computers, earning a small fee in the process. Bitcoin uses the blockchain by tracking records of ownership over this digital cash, so only one person can be the owner at a time and the cash can't be spent twice, like counterfeit money in the physical world can. But Bitcoin is just the beginning for blockchains. In the future, blockchains that manage and verify online data could enable us to launch companies that are entirely run by algorithms, making self-driving cars safer, help us protect our online identities, and even track the billions of devices on the Internet of Things. These innovations will change our lives forever, and it's all just beginning.
Thank you, Kathleen. There you go, we're all experts now. So I hope that gave you an idea of how blockchain works. I'm also in about 2 minutes just going to give you a very practical example just to bring that home a little bit. So in the traditional internet 2.0, which we're used to now, let's say Noemi, myself, Kathleen, and Atalanti formed a group. And between us, we had €100, 25 euros each. And I wanted to give my 25 euros to Noemi. The only way I would be able to do that, we're not in a physical location together, would be through a bank transfer. So I need an intermediary. I need a bank or PayPal or Venmo or TransferWise, or pick your poison. In the blockchain scenario, which is the next iteration of the web, we remove the intermediary. So again, the four of us, we form a group. There's €100 between us, but there is also a central ledger, a notebook sort of, that tells us that each of us has 25 euros. And if I want to give Noemi my 25 euros, Atalanti and Kathleen will be notified that that's what I want to do. And they will need to verify that that transaction happened between me and Noemi. and that gets written into the book. And because it's been distributed and verified and we can all see it, it's there and it's not going to change anymore. And there's no intermediary in the middle. And so we've removed the bank fees that you might have to pay, and she's getting the full €25. That's a very crude, oversimplified explanation, but that's essentially how blockchain works, in many different areas. So without further ado, I think Luise's example will help illustrate this a little bit. So I'm gonna come over to you, Luise, to get us started. You knew from a very young age that you wanted to make a difference in the world. You're a TEDx speaker, you're an author, an impact investor. Tell us about the work you're doing, your motivation for getting involved, and how your blockchain project is helping rural communities in Uganda.
Thank you so much, Seema, also for this great introduction to blockchain. My passion for this, as you said, started super young. So since I was a little girl, I knew I wanted to work in social impact and contributing to solving some of the global challenges. But one thing I was always fascinated with was innovation and technology, because I was working with a lot of organizations that had the best hearts, but they were somehow not that open to new inputs and finding out how we could make our work more efficient. My specialty at the time was anti-corruption and good governance. So I was always interested in how we could make things more transparent, more efficient. And at the time, I also started my first company, Yes Impact, where I'm the director now. And we had some projects in Uganda that we started, focused on financial literacy, financial inclusion, with local village saving and loan associations. So that's a project that's very similar to microcredits. The groups save money themselves, they get trained in business and financial inclusion. But the problem was with the money they saved and the loans they gave out from within their groups, they didn't have any proper records. They had paper records, notebooks, but at some point we were told that one of the books actually got eaten by a pig. So the book was gone, all the information was lost. And me sitting here in Switzerland, I had no access to what was going on. Obviously, that was terrible because their savings, their records, that's super important. That's all the money they have. So we needed something that was more transparent and secure for this. So at the time I was speaking to a friend who was an expert in blockchain, and I was like, wow, this is actually really interesting. I never heard about it much. I didn't understand it yet, but I was curious because I noticed that even people that were super smart didn't understand it yet. So I said, why not apply it to my area and see how this could help? I found a Danish provider that was actually specialized in exactly that problem and in the village saving and loan associations. And we partnered up and started the project Yes Impact Blocks in rural Uganda. And the way it works is people are trained in using a very simple phone app. The app they can store the information on. It works with pictures as well, with very simple words as well. So instead of writing it in their book, or in addition to writing it in their books, actually, they put in the same information about how much money they saved in this week, if they took on a loan, if the loan was paid back. They put all this information on a blockchain-based app. It's a kind of app that people with very limited literacy can use as well. The training took about a day for them to use it. Each group has these simple phones, they're locally available. And the provider that we work with, it costs about $7 per group per month. So it's not a lot of money. It's very affordable for an NGO or also for a project to be using. We even received a grant for this. So for us, the project was free during the first year. And it gave amazing results because now, like, none of the information can get lost. I can access this information at any point by simply going on a website that accesses the app. And we don't have any pigs eating our books and our information anymore. So absolutely great way to keep these records. And the project also got a lot of international attention. So I've done a lot of speeches about it. And there's a lot of international organizations and institutions that are very interested in this as well. Also wrote a paper on blockchain for financial inclusion in Uganda, because there is many interesting areas and international examples of how we can use this in this area.
Thank you, Luise. And globally, there are about 1.2 4 billion adults who remain unbanked. They're usually the hardest to reach. More often than not, they're women, they're poorer, less educated, and they live in rural areas. And as we'll see throughout this discussion, these are really the communities that are being helped by the use of blockchain. We'll come back to you, Luise, in a bit just to unpick some of the details around how the users manage their savings and how they're protected. But first, I'd like to come to you, Shadrack, and talk supply chains. They are notoriously complex with many stakeholders, varying interests, many third-party intermediaries, challenges that blockchain in theory is well suited to address. Share with us what you're doing to redefine supply chains in Africa, and in particular, how this is helping the producers and farmers you work with.
Thank you kindly. Well notable inputs from Luise. I commend her for the traction. You know, on my side, I think blockchain picked me. I didn't pick it. The very essence of where I was born at the intersection of not one, not two, but 3 provinces. In the US, they call them states, and with a 4th province about half an hour away. So I was born at the intersection of a melting pot of different cultures, different ethnicities as well. So which served me well later on when fast forward 2.5 decades later, I end up at the epicenter of a Web3 movement that seeks buy-in from various stakeholders at various levels that have got different types of interests. So yes, and my upbringing itself had an indicator of where I would end up, because the largest retail chain in Africa, one of the family members of that family was actually my neighbor. So they were rolling out this large scale commercial industrial operations, even kind of like spraying their crops with personal jets, which was a contrast from how I lived in that same neighborhood where I was raised by 2 generations of industrials, small scale farmers, my granny and my mom. And my granny went as far as dabbling into coffee farming and stuff, but my mom stuck more to staple crops. So I got to be the last generation in that neighborhood, in that village, that lived off the ground. Of course, I headed out to the big city at 15 to look for wider opportunities so that I will not be trapped back in that hand-to-mouth economy. And of course, I received some tangible scholarships. And you know what, thanks to philanthropy, I was funded not once, not twice, but up to 6 times to pace me through my university. I ended up in corporate. I hung my corporate coat back in my days with Deloitte, and that's when I headed full-time into management consulting across a 10-year window. Our focus, which might be of interest to particularly most women in the room right now, was how to scale businesses. One of the businesses or stories that we got involved in of scaling actually shot out the lights in the most unlikely way. Long story short, my ex-colleague from Deloitte approached us because she was retrenched, and then she started running a business out of a handbag. She was selling human hair extensions, and that was the most unlikely business for us to get involved in, because one, it had kind of like those flashbacks of my village economy where one is trapped in the informal sector. If some of you are aware of what is a taxi rank, it's a very chaotic place in Africa, almost like a marketplace. So she was selling out of a handbag in a taxi rank marketplace that was very chaotic sector, informal sector. It kind of like had the alarm bells of, I don't want to get her hopes up, because I haven't touched the informal economy in like about a decade and a half. So, but nonetheless, my wife and co-founder said, let's give it a try. Let's see this as one of those projects that we run them from the heart, not from our balance sheet. And indeed, long story short, 3 years later, we evolved a business out of a handbag into 4 bricks and mortar branches, including 2 5-star hotels. And we moved there from 2 employees to 40, and we moved there from $500 to $2 million US. So the most least expected story or growth is what got us the headlines, and it got even the big boys club on our very own Wall Street. It's called Mott Street, the biggest listing exchange. They started talking and exchanging notes. They invited us for dinners. Long story short, a US firm signed us a decent check for us to start an exploration into blockchain so that we could produce that type of an equitable inclusion at large scale. What were they looking for? Can we do quality assurance, particularly for women-led businesses that are seeking equitable access into their various supply chains, not just beauty, not just hair. And of course, we delved into that. Can we gift those that seek inclusion with business systems that will manage their inventory, assure provenance from point of origin right up until the end user? Because when you solve those pain points, big business was saying, we'll open up our shelves for these women's products to end up on our doorstep. And of course, with the tensions on the east of Europe, those two uncles over there, whatever they're doing there, it kind of like threw Africa into a food insecurity, kind of like a tense dynamic. And that's when a Swiss fund leaned forward to give us a decent check to prioritize agriculture, where it's a homecoming for me, where I find myself surrounded by various generations of mainly female farmers, but men as well, that are seeking equitable access for their crops, where they were told you can't afford quality assurance. The bars, the access barriers or the criteria was very high. Now we are democratizing that access that Atalanti spoke about in order to connect the most rural or peri-urban hardworking farmers with the urban centers or the suburbia nodes. So our approach is via the e-commerce model. And on a last note, the sharing economy might have been made popular by the likes of Uber, by the likes of Airbnb, but it's not sharing if it's not equitable. It's not sharing if women are ending up with debt under their nails, but before their food reaches my dinner table, they are starving. Before their food reaches my dinner table, they make up part of 811 million people that will go to bed hungry tonight. So in a nutshell, that's our focus between now and 2030, which is not far. It's just 354 Saturdays away for the SDGs to reach that expiry. We are doing just our bit, and I see I'm in great company where there's a joint heavy lifting to materialize those sustainable development goals. Thank you kindly. Thank you,
Shadrack. That was very enlightening and also entertaining at the same time. We're going to stay on the subject of supply chain for a while, and I'll come to you, Paget. You might have heard of the term tokenomics, which refers to the study of how the utility of digital currencies or other cryptographic tokens create economic value. Paget, your foundation empowers more people to participate in the economy, particularly last mile communities in the agriculture sector, and it employs the use of tokens. So could you tell us more about how you got involved in AgriUT and about the work you're doing? You're on mute, Paget.
Done that twice now.
There you go.
So dialing it back to our origins, that we're all saying where we're from. I was born in Malaysia and brought up in India and Japan and Indonesia and so forth. So a bit like Shadrack, saw different ethnicities and cultures and how life was approached in these great countries, which I enjoyed at the time, but I appreciate now. It's only when you're a bit older, you sort of these things sink in, and you start to think how you can actually do something to affect that and move the dial. So my background is really probably financing and taking companies from sort of small to scaling them up. And sort of in around 2010, I was a founder of a company called Sundrop Farms, and we developed a large food, energy, water project, which really is for the UN. It's operating, it's up and running here in Australia, called Sundrop Farms. I'll put it in the chat. Which really is about, this takes the idea of show a man a fish, to give a man a person a fish, they eat for a day, show them how to forever. And this was basically using renewable energies to desalinate seawater in greenhouses and make pesticide-free food that made fresh water and electricity as well, and with a zero carbon footprint. That got funded and up and running and is built, and the UN is very slow sort of picking up on it, but they'll get there at some point. If they built 5 or 6 of these in sub-Saharan Africa, it would be it would make quite a difference in terms of hunger. But from there, I stepped down from the board, and I looked at AgriUT, and I sort of they were set up in 2016, and they are an Australian fintech company that uses blockchain solutions and has created blockchain solutions to address sort of supply chains and the smallholder farmers that are at the bottom of the food pyramid. Fair trade is our largest, and I say our, AgriUT gave birth, in a way, created the AgriUT Foundation. So I'll come back to that in a minute. So the AgriUT Foundation and AgriUT are like sister companies ostensibly, and they focused on the 500 or so million farmers at the bottom of all the food pyramids. Now, we've done projects with the UN World Food Programme, we've done projects with USA, DFAT, and so forth. But what we found is that no one's really can access those farmers at the bottom of the food pyramid. In fact, fair trade is our largest client, and we all know fair trade on this call, I'm sure. They're our largest client, and they're on the chairman of fair trade. There's a video out there where she clearly says why she went with the AgriUT option is it's the only digital way to penetrate these 500 or so million farmers at the bottom of the pyramid. There's nowhere else to really, no other way to really penetrate them. The fair trade actually, by their own admission, will deal with the middle of the pyramid, farmers that are a little bit more up the rung. So if you have those 500 million farmers and you put their family around them and you put their community around them, you end up with 1.9 or so, or a couple of billion people that are unbanked and not financially included. So what AgriUT ostensibly did was, and the founders of AgriUT all came from critical systems banking, so the backbone of the banking systems globally. So I knew straight away that the transaction, the blockchain work they've done and so forth would be in good hands, and it has. We now have thousands of farmers on the AgriUT platform, and what happens is we take a smartphone and we make it a relevant device for smallholder farmers to be able to use for their everyday work. Now, this is a phone. Later on, if I may pull up a couple of photos, the sort of picture speaks 1,000 words, but these are like a military grade, very low cost smartphone with human interface designs on its symbols. So it's very, very simply to understand. As Luise was saying earlier about the training of this, we have what's called ag champions out in the field who go to certain villages, corral the interest, and then we'll sit down and show the farmers how to use the phone, how it can benefit them, basically, how they can record all the things on the blockchain they need, how they can record, how they can account for their payment receipting, how can they account for their payment invoicing, the crops that get exchanged with their co-ops and so forth. So all of these things go on the blockchain, and that's where AgriUT is now making serious inroads. They're in 18 countries, mainly Africa. Ethiopia is our main focus. We're expanding into Kenya and Uganda. We have some women. Just before I mention this, the majority of our farmers, as Shadrack touched on earlier, and we all know, the majority of these farmers are women. So we have some women-only co-ops, coffee co-ops in Indonesia, and we have some coffee co-ops and cocoa co-ops, and now getting into vanilla in Papua New Guinea. So what does the foundation do? So we sort of thought about, how can we connect consumers and corporations directly with these farmers? And we now have these technologies like blockchain that can enable this. So we set about creating our own token, a utility token. It's not like Bitcoin, it's not like Ethereum, it's not something you buy and hope it goes up in value. It's a utility token. It's 1 cent, it's pegged at 1 cent. We've now sold thousands of these. And what the idea is twofold, right? The benefits are twofold. So the acquirer, be it a consumer, be it my son, your daughter, or a corporation, and I'll come back to that in a minute because we'll be focusing on them quite heavily in due course. But they can, you can reward an AgriUT token, using the blockchain through these smartphones that AgriUT deploys and supports with the farmers, and the AgriUT token gets sent in minutes. There's no fees off it. The foundation, by the way, is non-profit and it's a volunteer board, got all of us. So we do it completely not for any returns. So the benefits are twofold. Someone buys $10 worth of aggregate, or a corporation buys that $10,000 of aggregate, and they can use it in their own supply chains, or they really reward it to the farmers. And we have a site called AgriRewards, so you can go on there, agrirewards.com, and we have hundreds of farmers. That will increase to thousands. It's going to be interesting when we get to the millions. And you can reward that token to the farmer. What the farmer does with a token, what do they think that is? Well, they're pretty savvy people, these people. Just because they haven't got the technology, it doesn't take them long to pick it up. If you look at Kenya, there's a currency called M-Pesa, which has been going years, and it's very, it's almost bigger than the Kenyan local currency. And so it just needs a bit of guidance. As I said earlier, the trick is getting into these communities and then sort of providing a good way for them to be able to use it. So what can they do with an aggregate, or once they're rewarded their aggregate? They can, with their co-ops, so we'll have co-ops, well, we do have co-ops on the system as well. So they can go to their co-op and they can cash it in if they want for local currency, fiat. Or they can use it to buy goods and services from the co-op or from AgriUT's marketplace. And that might be seedlings and so forth from the AgriUT, might be farming equipment for their work. It might be solar lighting to replace diesel lighting and so forth, and so they can benefit. And we have hundreds of testimonials of farmers holding up their phones. The first thing they do is pay off their smartphones. They love their smartphones. They sleep with them under the pillows. They realize that this can increase their incomes, and I can speak later to some examples where we've trebled incomes. So they're very keen. The Bush Telegraph is a lot bigger than Facebook, and word gets around very quickly. So we have thousands of farmers. One of our co-op in Ethiopia, coffee, is 500,000 farmers. We already have a few thousand of that, and we hope to increase more into that co-op. So the other benefit is, this is really what the foundation is about, is that we obviously start to build up cash reserves once we sell aggregate to corporations or consumers. So we build up cash reserves. Then we can go and do, which is what we really want to go and do, is some impact investing in the areas where the farmers are. So we already have farmers through AgriUT. So we have farmers in Ethiopia, Uganda, as I said. And so we can look at, we have a foundation allocation committee, and for projects, it might be a new school wing, it might be a health facility, it might be some communal lighting or whatever it is. We can start to impact, we can start to invest in some of those projects from the money from the cash reserves, from money raised from the aggregate. That's essentially, without sort of going into the details of the platform we're on, which is Cello, which is a platform, a blockchain platform designed for mobiles. It's designed for emerging markets. So it suits us perfectly. Cello is C-E-L-O. And so far, so good. We're the next step, really, 2 steps for us, is to scale up the number of farmers we have, and to and get this aggregate out there. And by the way, the phones, no one makes a penny on the phones. In fact, the phones will in time be phased out as an app. We're developing an app for smartphones, but that doesn't mean every farmer is going to have a smartphone. So we will still be in the business of helping a farmer. We get it at cost. We give it to them for cost. They can spend 2 or 3 years paying it off at $60 or something, $1 a month. And most of that at the moment is being paid off from the aggregate being rewarded to them by the public. So the phone, helps synchronize their cropping, their harvesting with their co-ops better. We found one group of farmers in PNG, their wastage was huge, and they were, with cacao, you have one harvest a year and it spikes. And if you miss that with your co-op, you're hungry for another 6 months. And when we got there a few years ago, we found bags of rotting beans beside the road, and the co-op is not necessarily around the corner. It can be 700 clicks away in some cases in some of these countries. So we got them on the platform, we gave them phones, showed them how to use it. In fact, it's a very high digital awareness in Papua New Guinea, as it happens, as there is in Kenya. And in time, they started to coordinate better their growing and harvesting of their co-ops. The quality of their co-op. So back to your point, Shadrack, about the quality assurance. So they could check all the time with the co-op that this is the quality you're looking for. Yes, yes, yes. And it basically cut out middlemen, cutting them, you know, just coming in and charging. They got more for their product. So they could go to the co-op, get a better price, and in turn their income was raised. So I'll give you an example of, you know, what sort of succinctly summarizes this. 20 years ago, a farmer who made a cup of coffee probably received about 12% of that cup of coffee if you broke it all down into the 6 different areas. And today, 20 years later, they get about 2-3% if they're lucky. Yet you and I pay more for that cup of coffee. So someone in the middle is having a bit of a lend, as they say in England. And so, and they're the corporates. So they're in our sights, so crosshairs, so to speak, in terms of being partners to the foundation, without sort of telling them to their, a lot of them caused this problem in the first place, the poverty and distress. Now you can come back in and sort of help the solution, right? So we're not saying we're going to completely
sorry,
solve.
if I can just pause you for a minute there, just to address a couple of questions. Olga had a question about what the business model was for the utility tokens, but I think you covered that. A quick question about how the farmers get the token rewards. If you could just explain that bit, and then we'll come back to you in a bit. I'm just going to go to Caroline.
So literally through. So it's a good point. So the farmers have they have to have the AgriUT phone, otherwise we can't get the AgriUT to them. The AgriUT's actually held in the co-op wallet, but it will come up on the farmer that you've chosen. So you can go to that. You can go to that farmer and choose whoever you want to choose, and donate $10, $2, $20, whatever, $1,000. It goes through minutes, no fees, but it goes to their phone. But it also goes to the co-op who manage that. That wallet. And the point of this, from the women farmers' point of view, is that if a lady farmer goes into their co-op with coffee beans or cocoa beans, everyone knows they're going in there with, and everyone knows they're going to come out with cash, right? So if they're fortunate enough to get home okay with all the cash and no problems, then it's quite likely that might not be in their hands for very long. So if the money from their crops can be kept in the co-op in a wallet safely, so that they can go back and buy other products with or services or equipment and so forth, then that's the idea. What this does is build up, it's an accountancy, keeping it simple, it's basically an accountancy platform for smallholder farmers. But once they build up this transaction record on the blockchain, it's all rulable, unchangeable, as you said, Seema, immutable, then they start to build up a history, a financial history of their work, which then enables them to go and get microfinance or crop insurance or buy goods and services. And the microfinance is an interesting, as we all know, an interesting area, but with really at the bottom level of these farmers, you would probably know, Shadrack, that they only need one major incident to tip them into debt. You know, if their main cow dies or an implement breaks and they haven't got the money to replace that, then they'll have to go and get debt, and that can be at 30-40%, you know, which is ridiculously high. Then they can, and if they can't get that and they're not eligible for that, don't forget they've got no transaction record until they get on this platform. Then there can be even worse stories of nefarious lenders, and if you default on that, that's how some girls and boys end up in child slavery, because they have to forfeit their children. So it's quite a horrendous story. So this gives a transactional immutable log, which allows them to start to go and get microfinance and crop insurance and other things, and then to buy some products.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paget. We'll come back to a couple of points that you made earlier, a little bit later in the discussion. I want to bring Caroline in at this point. Caroline, you've worked with nonprofits to activate blockchain-based projects. You're also passionate about tech for good initiatives and want to empower more people to enter the Web3 space, particularly women and underrepresented communities. Tell us about the work that you're doing in this space. We can't hear you, Caroline. Nope, not yet. Yes, okay, Caroline's going to reconnect. In the meantime, I did want to Paget brought up World Food Program, and it's actually one of my favorite examples of large-scale use of blockchain for humanitarian assistance. The World Food Program has the Building Blocks project, and essentially what it does is streamline operations across many different organizations to avoid duplication of effort and getting the right help to the right families at the right time. How this works is that in a crisis situation, there are many organizations on the ground. They're usually working in their own areas of specialty, bringing aid to the same families or the same people in need. With the Building Blocks project, what happens is all of these organizations are connected on a single platform, which is open and transparent for everyone to share information, very often in real time. And so what happens is they can coordinate and share resources and potentially help get aid to the right people at the right time, rather than provide it in fragmented and delayed forms. The Building Blocks project is currently helping about 1 million people in Bangladesh and Jordan receive multiple forms of assistance from different organizations through a single access point. I would encourage you to go to the website. If you'd like to know more, they actually explain how this works in quite a bit of detail, and it's a very interesting use case for how supply chains can be coordinated in a massive humanitarian assistance context. Just checking if we've got Caroline back with audio. You want to say something, Caroline? No, we still can't hear you. No worries. We'll keep going in the interest of time. I'll come back to Caroline in a bit. But my second question, again, to all panelists, a lot of your work is focused in rural communities and emerging economies where there may be existing socioeconomic and cultural barriers to women's participation in the economy or their access to resources, information, or support. I'm interested to know each of your experiences in getting people involved and engaged with your solution, and particularly in getting women to adopt the technology. Were there challenges or concerns that were different maybe to what you saw with men, or was it, actually quite easy? So I'll come back to Luise. Let's get started with you, and then I'll go to Shadrack next.
I think as with any technology, there's definitely hesitation in the beginning. What you need to know about our project is we mainly work with female entrepreneurs, female saving group members, but we have a 2/3 rule. So 1/3 is men, 2/3 are women. The one group where they didn't listen to the rule and was 50-50, the group collapsed because there was too much egos involved. But generally, the majority is women. And for them, I mean, it does take time, but we take the time to really listen to them, to explain in detail, and to explain what the advantage is of this technology. And I mean, we're always so hesitant with new technologies, and blockchain seems so overwhelming, but in the end, it's the same like explaining email or an Excel program or any other technology. It's just a tool that we're using. So as with any other technology we would use, we just take the time, we explain. Culturally, we have the leading positions in most of the groups by women. So they're the ones that are driving this anyways. Yeah, as in many other interventions of this type, it gives the woman a lot of confidence. They form super strong networks between them. My research project on our project with ETH Zurich is coming to an end right now, and they said the strongest factor in this is the community they created and the confidence that was gained from this. So the technology was adopted, and yes.
Thank you, Luise. I'm just going to see if Caroline is back. I don't see her. Okay, she's not back. So Shadrack, same question for you in terms of technology adoption and working with some of the smallholder farmers. Were there barriers to getting women involved? And there's also a question for you about how does the e-farmer app and blockchain cut out food waste?
Thank you kindly. Much appreciated, Anne, for the question. You know, when it comes to, first and foremost, reaching and impacting women, not just within the farming community, but also with technical skills, because we needed from the word go, we needed to lift as we rise. So our first challenge when we came into the blockchain space, long before we even reached the farm, was how do we ensure equitable representation of both men and women on our team of developers. We actually did a recruitment drive, and we ended up with developers across 5 countries. And sadly, when it comes to involvement of women in that first run of recruitment, it was actually just sitting at less than 5% of our entire developers. We had almost 20 developers, so it was quite minuscule in terms of what we had desired. And sadly, sometimes, and this is one of those gender discussions, we found that when we ran recruitment drives online, especially, even as Atalanti said that she used technology to reach people, so we did use technology, and we found that we did reach women that had the potential skill. We narrowed down on them, but sometimes the women that we reached on the developer side tended to second guess themselves, wondering if they're good enough to work on our project. And that was really heartbreaking, because here is my co-founder and wife, Preeti, doing the bidding for them and saying, reach them. And we will even tweak the algorithm to really focus mainly in ecosystems where women are actually developers there and they're represented. But there is that gender dynamic sometimes that I'm hoping that the developers that are women will actually emerge out of that slum, so that they can lead on a solid front footing and stop apologizing when they either reach the boardroom or the application studio. But that's something that we're going to look at even with our Swiss fund, the Nair Foundation. We are looking to now run a number of awareness campaigns on why it's important for women with those superpowers in coding to just take on more of a Web3 focus, but just in general, not be apologetic when it comes to the salary inequality, and or rather the salary ask, and also not be apologetic when it comes to the sizable tasks that land up on their desk. But that's something that we're going to do parallel to our farming community rollouts. And when it comes to impacting women in farming, Africa is home to hyper digitization right now, with such a wide access, even as even as Paget said, with a wider access to the smartphones. So quite often you find that in the most remote of villages, smartphones have gotten there, and we just had to figure out how to plug in the smartphones that already existed in their hands, to move away from watching cute pictures of grandchildren only exclusively, to just power them and adopt some of our simplified but very practical applications, particularly on the e-farmer side, that are really helping now do the heavy lifting to be involved in the business. So in terms of tech adoption was on the ground already. Apart from cute pictures of grandchildren, they were also beginning to do banking to a certain extent, because mobile banking apps reach those communities not at the level that we want, but actually it did necessitate that whole, sending of money home, remittances. So there's remittances within the nation itself, from the big cities to the villages, but there's also remittances across the border. So plugging into that remittance flow that already existed was a lot easier for us when we showed them that, listen, you can be part of the e-commerce economy just by weaving that smartphone into some of the IoT devices that we're going to bring to your farm to ensure traceability, visibility, and some transparency onto your farming plot. Could be a hectare, could be 2 hectares. So On the tech adoption side, hesitancy, we didn't find it across the genders. It was almost similar. However, on the talent side, we did get a bit of a pushback, and we are realizing that we need to raise a specific funding round in order to build further into our skills hub or a skills base, not just in South Africa where I'm based, but across your East Africa, across your West Africa. So that's something that is really a big and close to us, because if we're going to lift as we rise, we're going to have to enable access at a developer level and at a technical skill, so that solutions that are impacting women can also be built with women on board. It really helps from a co-creation.
Yes, it's very important, and a big ethos in Web3 as well, that women aren't just the consumers, that they are building the technology as opposed to previous iterations. Shadrack, if I could just get you to very
on the food laws.
Sure.
Yes.
Yes, on the food, if you could comment on that, and then
we're
coming up to the hour, so I'll go to Caroline after.
On the food laws, it's quite interesting. We're currently headquartered in Sandton, which is the richest square mile in Africa. I'll tell you why I'm mentioning that before I touch on the on nipping the food losses. The richest square mile in Africa exists across a very wealthy node of suburbs in the heart of Johannesburg. The problem with our farmers and the problem with even our township economy or those that live in slums is a problem of access. So why food waste has been reaching 40 to 50%, not just in SA, but even Nigeria is on that, is a problem of access. You are farming, but when you harvest, when harvest season comes, there will be that middleman that tells you that, no, you know what? You cannot bring your crops into the supply chain. Your name is not good enough. There's this criteria you didn't meet. There's this certification, only for that middleman to take that crate or take that truck load and then turn around. Before they even leave your farm, they are already sending some WhatsApps and everything to now put different labels on your crops. They will have 20 different names. That's not your name. So the inequalities really hit farmers when it comes to access. And with access, it's like those rotting bags on the side of the road. When you don't have access, then you end up with food being turned into manure. So now enabling equitable access to lower the barriers to entry is what's needed. There is a bridge not far from our office that is connecting the most, what do you call it, a slum neighborhood that's near us. It was built by 150 million rands to enable 10,000 people to cross into Sandton, the rich square mile. But cross for what? To ask for jobs. We now want those that are industrious, not just from the slum, but from the villages as well, to have that node on our ledger to be able to access those homes and those shelves that the middleman was keeping out of their reach. Thank you kindly.
Thank you, Shadrack. Caroline, do you want to do a quick mic test?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we've got you now. So I'll reintroduce you, Caroline. Go ahead, tell us about the work you're doing in the Web3 space, as well as if you could also tell us a little bit about the work you've done with UNHCR in terms of using NFTs as a way to aid refugees. Go ahead, Caroline.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much again for having me here. I'm very happy that the microphone is working right now. And I'm also really inspired by all your use cases for blockchain for good. It's really, really insightful, even for myself. So I am a founder and CEO of WAGMI, which is a platform that helps users discover and connect with emerging tech events. We started actually last year, and we just wanted to bring and leverage the Web3 tools and NFT utility in the event sector. Outside of that, I also founded a company and a community which is called Women Web3 Travels. That community is dedicated to female members in the tech industry and to help them share travel plans and essentially connect with events to help them feel more safe in the very male-dominated industry. And on top of that, I also advise brands and companies with their Web3 strategies. I also help NGOs like UNHCR, World Vision, and others to leverage blockchain technology for fundraising specifically. How my journey started, actually, I started working as a head of marketing for a company in 2020 that was the first company working on a blockchain. It's called Effect Network, and they developed the first platform that essentially is fully decentralized and enables to work for people from anywhere around the world. The company is actually now fully run by a DAO, which is really interesting because I think they established one of the first DAOs ever, like 7 years ago. And their goal is essentially to develop and help projects in the nonprofit sector. And so in 2020, we got reached out by UNHCR. UNHCR specifically asked us if we could help them to develop a strategy for fundraising more funds to help refugees worldwide. We took this as a really big challenge, but of course, we had such a big passion for blockchain already back then that we saw a huge potential, especially in the NGO sector, how this can help people worldwide, and not only to gain new skills in the sector, and of course, seek more job opportunities, which are very growing and immense in this sector in general, but also how to bring more awareness to important issues like the refugee crisis. So how this whole project started, and I absolutely love talking about this use case just because, first of all, it was the first use case I worked on for the Tech for Good movement, but also I think it was the most favorite one still till this day that I participated on. The whole process was to actually design an NFT collection, which was co-created by 144 refugees from camps located worldwide, and with artists named NFM Callian. The mission was to co-create these NFTs and sell them, of course, to people and raise funds that went 100% to the UNHCR cause. And the project was incredible. First mission for us was to, of course, educate refugees that participated on this project, not only to understand the blockchain technology, how NFTs work, how they can actually participate and receive payment for all their work that they did with us through the blockchain, but also we really wanted to share the passion that we had for blockchain and the innovative tech with them, and to see whether they would like to, for instance, participate on many more job-related tasks in the future, such as this one. So it was really, really successful. We launched a collection which is called We Pieces. It was 6,800 NFTs on the Solana blockchain. And because the campaign went really, really well, and we had such a great outcome from the auctions, we raised $350,000 that went 100% to the UNHCR. And what I've learned from this, and I think this is a really great experience to share with everybody that is thinking to use blockchain or NFTs for their Tech for Good movement. I think blockchain is really, really strong technology that allows funds donated to charities to be tracked, which I think automatically creates really much a greater trust and accountability for charities that can demonstrate that their funds have been effectively used. I think this really makes blockchain a really potential game changer when it comes to the charity sector. Why I'm saying this is because I worked with charities in the past on different marketing activations, but this really turned out to be one that was so welcomed by everybody who bought these NFTs. Not only that they really felt proud that they had a sort of a stamp of being the buyer, being the one who is charitable, and they could actually showcase that to their friends. They could actually also print a physical piece of that NFT as an art and have it in their home, but also they really knew to which refugees and to which cause their funds went to, and they could see that online on the blockchain, of course. So I think this is sort of what my passion started when it comes to Tech for Good and leveraging NFTs and blockchain. This was my first project I worked on. And over the years, I always advised companies to not only, for example, try to partner with different artists in the sector to create an NFT collection to, again, raise funds, but also just to try to be creative, how they can leverage this for their good. And maybe some interesting statistics as well from the 144 refugees that we actually worked with on this project. 60 of them got a job following up in the blockchain sector, which to us was absolutely incredible to know and to learn, because we had such a close relationship with all of them throughout this whole journey. And it just made us extremely happy that they could actually learn these skills and apply them into having a career in the Web3 sector. And I would say that sort of from my side, how that really enabled me to understand a huge potential of blockchain technology and how they can help people worldwide, no matter from which background you're coming from, no matter if you have a passport, no matter what is your religion, it is completely and truly borderless. And that's why I think I really believe in this cause and in using tech for good.
Thank you, Caroline. We had a question from Atalanti, if you could speak a little bit about DAOs. So we would be remiss to not mention DAOs in a conversation about blockchain, right? Decentralized autonomous organizations, which are basically a new kind of organizational structure that has come about simply because of blockchain and the ability to organize people across different geographic regions around a purpose. Can you tell us a little bit, Caroline, from what you've seen about maybe the advantages and potential disadvantages of DAOs as a social impact tool?
Absolutely. I think before I completely deep dive into this question, let me just quickly and briefly highlight sort of, what DAOs are essentially and why they were created and what is sort of the history of it. So DAOs, or decentralized autonomous organizations, like you just mentioned, are actually organizations created by developers that have no central leadership. Hence, that's why the word is centralized. And it's really essential that they have a horizontal structure, which basically means they are governed by the community members, and they have a set of automated rules, which enables the protocol to continue functioning without any need of a leadership, such as a board, which is very much in the traditional centralized businesses. And DAOs are also completely open source, which means that members can fully contribute into the development, but they can also see, for instance, the rules that are built into the code behind the DAO that they participate in. And I think, like you just mentioned, it is really central to all the DAOs and the importance of the community governance. And I think that is which makes it very a natural fit for the social impact sector. Whereas you're a nonprofit that have a traditional centralized structure, they can actually now use DAOs to have their decision making more and more, which is of value and importance to the community-based decisions. And I think that's super beneficial for the communities to make that collective decision. For example, where the funds are spent or where the funds are going. That gives it really much, a trusty overview for any nonprofit, but also you can really, really include everybody within that community to make these decisions, which is really a good feel, I would say, movement for everyone. And so now that
so you would say, so the beneficiaries as well, all the stakeholders become part of the community, and therefore there is always that connection with what is really needed on the ground and how we can implement. Okay, really interesting. Thank you. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So now that I just briefly covered what DAOs are, and of course, there is so much in-depth information from the technical aspect about them, but I think that could be for another panel, maybe follow up. I think now I'm just going to quickly mention why I personally think why they are such a great fit for the social impact and what are the benefits. I will talk about two main ones that I think are essential. One of them is the most obvious, which is the social impact use cases for DAOs and how they're actually utilizing them as a means for fundraising and providing fully direct donations to charitable causes. I think DAOs can be set up to accept memberships from anybody interested in supporting the cause. So to have a purchase of governance token, what that means, basically, if you would like to help a charity that is, for instance, I don't know, supporting women worldwide to have job opportunities, you can just buy a governance token. With that membership, they can use these funds to distribute for the cause that they are standing for. But you can also, for example, see where these funds are going exactly, which women they are helping, what are the use cases, and take decision lead within that foundation, not only giving money, but also really being a voice in the collective community. So obviously that's completely changing the traditional fundraising as we know it. And I completely believe that it's changing it for the better. The second, I would say, advantage of DAOs is that they create new ways for organized community if previously didn't exist. So they provide a structure that basically communities can take advantage of and organize, raise funds, and deliver super important services, right? This could include like local neighborhood groups, creating a DAO to raise funds for local projects, or even a municipal governments utilizing a DAO structure for the participatory of budgeting, or even to do a referenda. So when it comes to DAOs, their potential as a tool to organize communities, I think is truly amazing and extremely valuable. And I do completely believe in DAOs. I think they're really a vital part for the social impact ecosystem, and not so distant in the future, hopefully. Like I mentioned earlier, I work with a company that now is actually using their DAO to fully run the business, which is incredible to see, because now the community is holding the token of the company, and they're actually deciding, for example, to which marketing activations the funds should go, or which strategy they should take as a business altogether. And
it's really about democratizing the decision making and about democratizing the management of the company, really, instead of the traditional top down. It's now really bottom up, right? I'm sorry to interrupt you there, Caroline. So we are going to run a little bit over, so I do have to tell the audience that we'll just open up quickly to all the panelists for some closing remarks. I would love it, Luise, if you came first, to also just quickly talk about protections for the end users. So because the area of blockchain and technology is still new, there are sort of gaps in governance and regulations and things like that. So when it comes to the smallholder farmers and these microloans and these users who are using savings, there are no traditional KYC AML checks that a bank would usually do. Are users protected? If you could just comment on that, and then closing remarks from each panelist very briefly before we wrap up, that would be great. So Luise, and then I'll come to Paget, Shadrack, and back to Caroline.
I think the key for me here is good awareness raising. So first of all, also see, is this the best alternative you can use? So is blockchain technology the best that you could use for this context? And then really work with the end user. So explain, what is this about? Why are we using it? What are the advantages? And to really go deep into that, give the space to listen as well. And then throughout the process of implementing this, also having open feedback loops, so they can, if they're worried about something, they can always talk about it. And I think this way works really well.
Thank you. Thanks, Luise. Would you agree, Paget? Anything to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just to answer your initial question about how did the technology go down with people. Of course, as I said, the majority of our farmers are women, and they appreciated the safety aspect that this provided, rather than walking around with cash, and they appreciated the ownership aspect. It's theirs, their beans, they're growing. So that sort of addresses that. One thing I wanted to mention too: these smartphones, we take the operating system out, we put our own one in, so we clear out all the sort of social media. So it doesn't mean they can't one day put that in, but that's up to them. But we have hundreds of farmers in Papua New Guinea, for instance, that have no connectivity at all. So ours all works on the QR code. So when someone takes their coffee beans in, or meets their buyer or their co-op, it's transphone, QR code is read, QR code is exchanged. And if you're in the highlands somewhere and it doesn't get straight through to the cloud, then it still is a transacted business log. So one of them will get back into a hotspot, or the co-op usually, and then it goes through to the cloud and is fully transacted from there. So the connectivity part we have addressed. That's obviously something we get asked all the time. What about, so it's basically done on QR codes. The QR codes have quite a big role with us too, because we are very shortly partnering with coffee companies and chocolate companies that are retail, and we will have QR codes on, say, the coffee bags, and that you scan that as a consumer, and you get up a little picture on your phone of where that's come from, the farmer that's created it, and without even buying any of the AgriUT, because we've given some AgriUT already, or the coffee company's bought some already, or the chocolate company. So you just push, you don't have to do anything. You go, oh, that's a nice idea. And so made my coffee from Ethiopia, push the button, and 10 cents or 20 cents is rewarded. There's going to be 3 options on there. The second option, if you wanted to give a bit more information and postal address, postcode, so forth, not address, postcode, stuff that's already out there on the internet, the coffee company we will double that reward. And then hopefully once the coffee's run out or the coffee's run out, you go, I kind of like the principles of that coffee company. I'm going to go back and buy some more there. So this is a way of consumers connecting direct to the farmers as well. Directly. So just wanted to touch finally on that food wastage that Shadrack was asked about. I touched on earlier, I might have rushed through it, but when we had these 100, when we first trialed it in Papua New Guinea, we had these 100 farmers. As I said, we found beans by the side of the road that, as Shadrack said, they were wasted. They just go into manure at the end of the day. Whereas now the phone helps them synchronize their cropping and their harvesting with their co-op. So the time to pick it and harvest it is when the co-op wants it. So it starts to minimize wastage. Now, those 100 farmers that we did that with in Papua New Guinea, they increased their revenues 3-fold. And what's interesting, it must be a lucky number, 60, because you had 60 in your thing, Caroline. 60 of those 100 farmers, 60% of them went onto our marketplace with the AgriUT, with the increased income they'd earned from that product, and then bought solar lighting to get rid of their diesel lighting, which is fossil fuel, and it's dangerous and it's nasty. So, a few things get done in one go here. We help the farmer, we get rid of food wastage, we help the farmers increase their income. Moving from diesel to solar lighting is a climate mitigation act in itself, and that can be water irrigation or whatever, but in that instance it was solar lighting. And to get 1 kit of solar lighting to one farmer in Papua New Guinea or Uganda, or the logistics don't work, right? It's impossible. You get 60 farmers together and you aggregate an order of 60 solar kits. We don't even touch it. We don't make anything of it. They then get sent, they get paid for by us, they get sent to the co-op, and the next time the farmer's there taking the crops in, they pick up their solar lighting or irrigation kit, whatever it is. So, we haven't got it all lit yet. At the moment, we're growing quite quickly. We seem to be getting a lot of interest from farmers to, as I said, the Bush Telegraph works very well, and a lot of people approaching us to try and get onto the platform. And this blockchain just completely makes all the records immutable. Nothing can be changed. So it creates this sort of accountancy record forever for these farmers, which they've never had.
Thank you, Paget. Yeah, and it is an evolving technology and an evolving space. And yes, things will just get better and hopefully better regulated as well. I'm going to come to. Sorry.
I was just going to ask if we have a moment at the end, Seema. I chucked about 4 photos onto one page, which I'd love to share with people, which is some of the farmers with the phones, the QR code, how the farmer looks that's growing the coffee, and actually a picture of the phone. It is a military. The farmers can smash it, drop it in the water, everything. And even if they lose it, we just shut it down and we replace it and give them the information back there again.
I might ask Kathleen that question in terms of how we might be able to share that with the audience later.
We could share it. I mean, we send a mailing at the very end with, once the video's up and
okay.
Paget, if you want to send it over to me, we can include that in the mailing.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks. Shadrack, I'll come to you for some brief closing remarks. And then Caroline, there's a question in the chat for you about the size of DAOs for an NGO. If you want to respond to that in the chat, that's fine as well. I'll come to you for closing remarks right after. Over to you, Shadrack.
Thank you kindly. First and foremost, I must extend my gratitude for your hospitality, and I must commend those that lean forward to make time as we compare best practice and notes. I've taken a couple of notes myself from my learned colleagues that are also making inroads in adoption in the sector. What I want to close with, I'm reflecting on the words, those flagship words by Benjamin Franklin, where he said that death and taxes is guaranteed, even though there's so many uncertainties. I think we ought to edit that a bit and add dinner. Most of us that are here today, we have dinner appointments in some way or the other, whether in the home or out there. The question that I have is that while some might have gotten on into this meeting unsure about where they stand with blockchain, on our side, it's never about blockchain. It's about inclusion. It's about how is it that I actually enjoy my dinner, knowing that from farm to fork, there was no exclusion, there was no bullying, there was no monopoly effect, there was no middleman that played out draconian tactics to actually deny smallholder farmers a seat at their very own dinner table. So that's what it's about. So dinner should be added. There's death, taxes, and dinner. So we wouldn't want to add weight to the global poverty by actually not being privy to where our dinner comes from, where our breakfast comes from, and seeing that we are having this meeting online. It takes about 1,000 different units to make up a smartphone or to make up your laptop. We would want blockchain to actually give us a line of sight, even beyond farming, into technology, manufacturing, to ensure that child labor was not involved in making this meeting possible. I mean, that's what philanthropy is about, to reach and impact those communities that perhaps would have been left behind. So both philanthropy and technology can do the joint heavy lifting so that we don't have anyone left behind. So remember, it's not about technology, it's about truth. That's why we playfully call some of our solutions truth machines, because the truth does matter and the truth never goes out of fashion. Thank you kindly.
Very good.
Thank you, Shadrack. That was excellent closing remarks. And finally, we're coming back to Caroline. Any closing remarks before we wrap up?
Yes, absolutely. So I think just regarding the question, I just quickly share that I don't think there is really, one size fits all for DAOs. If you're a small NGO, it doesn't matter at all. You can still start a DAO. I think the importance of just remembering what DAO means, there is no one central entity taking care of the DAO. So whether you're a small or big firm, it doesn't really play a role within the DAO structure. I think the really most important part of that is the threshold of your DAO and just calculating correctly what is the weight of your votes for your members and whether that makes sense in terms of, for example, the percentage of your DAO members voting at the same time, and once what is the threshold for being vote accepted. So I think those are the few things to look into, but in terms of the size of DAO, I think it can be from 3 members up to thousands. So just to end with that note.
Thank you so much, Caroline, and thank you to all the panelists for being here today. You've provided so much insight, and I hope made blockchain a little more accessible and understandable to everyone as well. Thank you to Atalanti and Noemi for facilitating this discussion. I think it's so timely. I'm going to hand back over to Atalanti for any closing remarks before we wrap up.
This has been so interesting. And I think we were kind of being quite daring to touch this subject, but we really reached the most amazing panelists. Seema did an incredible job of putting it all together, because I said, I think we need to touch the supply chain. We need to talk about fundraising with blockchain. We need to look at financial inclusion we touched everything in such a clear and wonderful way. And I think it also demystifies it and clearly separates it from the many kind of scandalous things that are happening with crypto, and putting it back where it should be in really a way that we are actually accessing. For me, the important thing is accessing the last mile and really ensuring that that last mile is reaching the market and benefiting from it. And I think this has been really clearly expressed today. And thank you all for attending. This is recorded, so people who didn't attend will be able to watch it. Please share with your community, because I think there were so many insights and so much knowledge that can be actually shared beyond our community. So please do share the recording. I'd like to say again a deep thank you for the enthusiasm, excitement, clarity around from all the panelists. And I think you're right. It's about knowing when we have our dinner that we are enjoying our dinner, knowing that the people that have actually made it possible for us to get that dinner are also benefiting. So I love that. Thank you, Shadrack. And thank you all. And please, we will be connecting. We will be giving the links to each of our panelists. So please reach out to them if you want more information, if you want to collaborate, if you want to work with them. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you,
Good night, Paget.
Yeah,
Sleep
good night,
well.
Paget.
And thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.